That's what we have you for, Edward.
Yeah. All right, we are live. So in 1999, some founders put a computer in a rolling chair, rolled it down the street, and that was the inception of Medidata. Here we sit almost 27 years later, kicking off Next New York, live from Times Square. Welcome to From Dreamers to Disruptors, live. This is our first live podcast. Go ahead and make some noise. You hear that live studio audience in the background. I'm so excited to kick this off. My name is Edward Ford. I have an illustrious panel of guests with me. To my right, from Bristol Myers Squibb, Matteo de Tommaso. We have IDC analyst Nimita Limaye, and we of course are accompanied by a from Dreamers to Disruptors, a mainstay, Medidata CEO Anthony Costello. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for taking some time to be here with us today. Make some noise for the panel, y'all. Yes, yes, yes. So we just stepped off, literally just stepped off of the keynote stage, and the excitement in this room is bubbling. So quick reactions. Matteo, I'll start with you. What did you hear from the keynote stage that got you excited or made you think a little bit?
I think the biggest thing I saw, Edward, that made me excited was just the span of things that Medidata is tackling in parallel and the very good patient focus on the way you're looking at things. It's all about making sure we make a difference for patients in the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Nimita, over to you. I know you see a lot of industry conferences. Did anything stand out for you today in that opening session?
Yeah, I mean, I was just telling Anthony, I thought the trial simulation piece was fantastic. Here, I think you spoke about probability of success, and I really feel that that is going to make a difference.
Nice, nice. Now, Anthony, obviously you were on stage orchestrating the entire keynote. You were like dot of the opening session over there. What are some of the things that stood out to you in the run up to today and that you were really excited to share with the broader metadata community?
Yeah, well, today's a big day for us because Next New York is always big. But the run up to Next New York really has been going on for a while because we used to do Next New York in the late fall, in November. Last year, we decided to move it to the spring. So we kind of skipped a year, and we moved now into doing our whole next series in year, starting in March in New York, and then all the rest of the cities around the world for the rest of 2026. So it's been a pretty big run up, and I think one of the reasons the keynote today was so exciting for me is that we really had all of 2025 metadata advancements getting ready for this next 2026, and I hope it really showed.
Yeah, I think it came through. I mean, obviously working with you to deliver all this and seeing the energy in the teams to deliver this, and as they make those advancements, sharing those things out. I think you definitely expressed that from the stage, and I think it's taking us in a great direction. Nimita, I want to ask you about kind of where we are relative to kind of AI adoption across the industry. I mean, there's a range of talk. Everyone is obviously talking about AI. You can't help but not. I'm curious about your perspective on where the industry is relative to adopting the latest in some of the generative AI capabilities and what that value is looking like in terms of transforming some of the overall outcomes that our industry sees.
Sure. As you said, AI is disrupting everything. I think it's an apt title for this panel because it's disruption at scale. It's so much that's happening in the world right now, but AI is a major disruptor. I feel we have gone through various phases. So, for example, in 23, we were going through what I would call the pilotitis phase, right? I mean, everything was being tested out. There was this huge FOMO, and everyone was like, okay, we got to do something, not sure what, but let's try it out. 24, 25, I think governance has set in, platformization is coming in. There is a clear vision that we need to embed this within workflows. So those are the perspectives that are changing. Just taking to trial optimization, you spoke a lot about that. At IDC, we did a survey, right? And we saw that we did the survey late last year, and we saw that about 34% of the industry was still doing pilots, But about 38% said, hey, we are already implementing this, we're already rolling it out. 2 years down the line, I think what you're going to see is deployment at scale. So there is an urgency, there is acceptance. Trust is definitely a challenge. Change management is a critical component, but will this scale? It will. And great to see the initiatives that you're taking from the agentification part of it, because it's Gen AI and agentic AI, which are going to take two to tango, and they're going to work hand in hand. So I think this is the future.
That's amazing. And, you know, you said two things, and actually one thing I want to give Matteo a little bit of time to talk a little bit more about. You talked about this idea of driving adoption and how you do that at scale within an organization. And Matteo, you started talking about this a little bit on the keynote, and how you look to drive adoption within your organization. I'm just curious to hear more about kind of your philosophy around driving organizational change, specifically targeted at AI, because the reality is people don't like to change, even with the great promise of this. And even as we pursue this mission, we talked about serving patients. When folks now get into their workflows, they have a workflow. And yeah, maybe 62 steps that are held together with duct tape and bubble gum, but that's their process. And it can be difficult to get them off their process. So I'm curious how you go about addressing that and inspiring the kind of catalyzing the desire within the organization to change and adopt some of these new ways of working.
Well, I've got to start, though, by saying that I'm glad to hear from Nimita that there is a possibility that these things will scale, because I now have AI having an impact across the whole value chain of R&D. And we have 3 platforms now that are truly scaled, that we have 320 some clinical trials, all using our development operations platform that's AI powered. We have the ability to use AI to work with our portfolio data, and we have a document authoring platform that helps us to accelerate document creation all the way for study startup, all the way through submission. And so it is scaling today. It's certainly where I see it. And how do you do that? It's not the way you do that is a couple of things. But number one is getting the right people on the team from the beginning, making sure the mission of the team is really crisp and clear, and making sure that you're paying attention to execution every quarter and every step, and not just to build platforms or have AI, but to make a real difference to medicines ultimately. And so it's the impact, measurable impact on our work to bring medicines to patients that's the real driver. And that it's easy to be motivated about that and excited about that. I guess it's table stakes, Edward, that you got to have something that's worth using, right? You got to have something that really is game changing or really makes a difference.
Yeah, and the trust there, I think you talked about within those teams of lining up with the mission of serving patients is critical. Having tools that actually do what they're promising to do all helps to reinforce and give people a little comfort about moving away from maybe something that they were used to using and dipping a toe into something that might be a little bit different. Anthony, this concept of trust, right, balancing this off, because you said it a couple times, you, Tom, as well, talking about AI technology, and specifically on the Medidata platform, not being this quote-unquote black box where some compute happens and then you spit something out, and being very, very keen on, hey, everything that we're doing within the Medidata platform relative to AI, it's traceable. Obviously, there's regulatory implications across the platform for that. Talk a little bit about building trust in this era of AI for folks that are using the tools, but also for the output, talking about regulators, talking about the industry, and really getting to patients feeling like they actually trust these outputs.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the reasons we've invested so heavily in this area over the last few years is we view ourselves as nicely positioned at the center of so many different clinical trials where we already have trust. We already have huge portions of our customers' portfolios run in some part, or in some cases in every way, on the Medidata platform. And I think everyone, we haven't said it yet on the podcast, but everyone here knows that a big part of moving from what Nimita referred to as the FOMO era or the pilot era of AI into something that can be done at scale. A big part of that is having AI that's useful to you. It's become such a buzzword that there's junk all over the place, junk AI learning on junk training data sets and not really bringing a big opportunity or a big advantage, let alone the trust piece. But we're different from that because we've got these tens of thousands of historical trials already cleaned, already delivered to regulators, or in the process of still being run live out with sites. Our AI is training on those data sets with those customers that already use us. So, that's a big piece. I think the other thing, Matteo touched on it for a second, we've invested heavily in patients. And I know our whole industry obviously is driven around bringing better therapies faster to patients. But specifically at Medidata, we built, again, through Alicia Staley's work, we built a patient insights group. We have a whole cadre of patients that are on staff at Medidata helping us design not just the software, but the AI, what's going to be useful, what's going to be trusted, and how do we take it out of R&D bubble into real sites, real patients, real trials in a way that everyone feels comfortable using. So, we've tried to lean into that trust factor so that we could hopefully have that kind of relationship with customers. These new technologies come out and trust is really required to get the uptake on those new technologies.
One thing that has not been spoken at this desk, which I'm actually really excited about, is no one's really mentioned a product name, which is pretty cool. And it's part of our philosophy relative to rolling out these 3 experiences: the study, the patient, the data experience. In our next general session, we're going to do a deep dive into each of the 3 experiences and some of the developments that we've made there. And so Matteo, and maybe Nimita, you can respond to this as well. I'm curious how, because one of the things you said earlier, Matteo, is that you are using AI across, not just in one area of the kind of research cycle, but really across the entirety of that cycle. So I'm curious in your response to us addressing and thinking about things in a more holistic fashion. So this idea of how do we optimize for patient involvement in the study? How do we optimize data collection and analysis, and not just focusing in on some of these discrete quote-unquote products or narrowing in on a process? Is that kind of how you're talking about things and looking at it within your organization?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that we have an overly complicated environment in terms of switching between experiences from one place to another. And a big part of the work that we did on development operations was to try to make that a much more streamlined, simpler, single place to go that does guide you from one end to the other. Now, that's always in competition and has the challenge of, and I need to be able to swap out modules that do really cool stuff very rapidly. So how do I maintain that end-to-end experience that is easy and familiar and comfortable while still being able to swap out where I'm getting those components, whether I'm building some components in a way that it gives an overall end-to-end ability to run a clinical trial, discover a medicine. So that's the balancing act we have to play. And agility is everything right now, right? The moat is gone on, you can create millions of lines of code with no problem. So you've got to compete on your ability to really understand how to solve some important problems and really understand your customer base and their experience. And you got to compete on agility.
And Nimita, I wanted you to continue on that same thought with an industry perspective. There are many point solutions that do specific pieces of this cycle. And how are you kind of seeing, or are you seeing a shift away from we do this thing really well to then maybe talking more broadly and holistically about supporting the process of clinical research? How is that happening in the market, and how are folks talking about that? And how are sponsors and then CROs engaging with providers to support their execution for that? I'm curious in your perspective there.
Okay, those were a lot of questions, but into one.
I think they put some caffeine in my water.
So firstly, I think this is the era of unified platforms. Everyone is sick of single point solutions, and siloed, fragmented systems. There is a fundamental need to integrate and to drive the connectivity. And also, I think it's really good that you're weaving in the patient's voice into the products that you're developing, because at the end of the day, it's about the patients. I think patient experience is everything. We are all patients over here at different points of time. The other part I would say is, and I'll share a small example here. This was the CFO of a big pharma company who is working with a tech company, investing in major investments in platforms. And he said, to your point, you can code everything. He said, we're coding ourselves, we're using it. He said, we want to completely disinvest in this platform. Do you think it's a good idea? And it may be a good idea, but the fundamental question is, what goes into building that? A lot of domain expertise, a lot of regulatory compliance. And at the end of the day, the data that goes in. I think you called out the piece around the data, and I think, everyone's using AI, right? Again, if you just go back to some IDC data, there was a very interesting statistic which said that 54% of the industry said that using Gen AI for clinical trial optimization is absolutely critical to disrupting the way we operate. That's huge, right? But Gen AI models may be great, but if you have models that are trained on domain-specific data, I think it makes a world of difference. So bringing it all together, weaving in the patient experience, and providing a unified platform and models that are really trained on domain-specific data, I think those would be our differentiators.
All right, so we have a tradition on From Dreamers to Disruptors. There's a question that we ask to close out every episode. It's usually Anthony and one other person, but I want three of you. I want to make sure that you each have a chance to answer this question. All right. So our question is, what do you dream to disrupt next? What do you dream today that you can disrupt in the future? So Anthony, I'm gonna give Matteo and Nimita just a second to think about it. You think about this all the time. So why don't you start? What are you dreaming to disrupt next?
I think lots of things, but since we only have 2.5 minutes left, I think what I would narrow this down to, and let's go back to the keynote theme around get after it. So the way we like to end the podcast is, what's your dream, but also have it be a call to action to the audience that's listening. And I think I would follow through with this get after it call to action to answer this question. We have the tools, we have the technology, we're through pilots and FOMO, and we're into really actualizing some of the long-time potential benefit of AI to do something different now. So I think my call to action for our industry would be, let's do it, let's get after it, let's go faster than is comfortable, and really try to make a big difference in the way our industry works over the next few years.
All right, go get it. Nimita?
I'll say move away from anything that's document, move entirely to data, because data is really, I started my career, 30 plus years ago. And as I walked through the clinical trial industry, why are we looking at anything beyond data? Because it's data that is really the intelligence behind everything. And today with AI, no AI is going to succeed without the data. But we still have a lot of static documents, and everything should move into a dynamic, data-driven world. That's what I believe is the future.
And I'm going to go simple, more medicines for more patients, faster. And I think there's a lot of promise in the current technologies that we have in the AI to both make that a reality of increasing probability of technical success and probability of success on clinical trials, and to make them go faster so that we get more medicines to more patients.
Well said. Matteo, Nimita, Anthony, thank you so much for christening our live From Dreamers to Disruptors. Was it good, y'all? Yes, the crowd is live in here. They're making some noise. All right, that's it for our first session. We have some more live sessions coming here from Next. We've got a ton more, got more on the main stage. We've got some breakouts starting this afternoon. A lot of excitement here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you later here live from Next New York. Make some noise, everybody.